Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I am joined by Fergus. Now, Fergus is a performance coach who works with professional and elite performers, special forces and corporate leaders. Welcome to the show.
Amy, thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. And we were introduced by the fabulous Lee Hayes. I've got another thank you to show her way because she has connected us to have this conversation today.
Yeah, Lee's a special person. She's very, very good. She's a great person, but she's very, very good at what she does as well.
Absolutely. And she loves working with people who are kind. So I know that this conversation is going to be a great one already.
She's a great person herself, yeah.
Fantastic. So what do we want to talk about today? What is it you're doing right now?
Well, I guess it kind of comes around to what we'll end up talking about later. But I think for me, finding my purpose and understanding my purpose led me to really working with high performers and understanding how they can sustain success. And it really happened by accident because for me, I've probably been a little bit fortunate that all of the work that I've done has been with either professional athletes. My very first job was in the Premier League. You don't start in professional sport at the top. Generally you work your way up. I was fortunate. So I've always worked with elite performers, whether it's in sport or military or in the corporate world, and really helping them understand how to sustain their level of success. Because achieving it is one thing, but being able to sustain it is another. And more of my work is really in the executive and corporate space, because the principles of high performers are the same across the board. Because ultimately, you're still dealing with a person, albeit the arena might be a little bit different, the context might be a little bit different, but the person, the DNA, the human, still the same human. And that's been a fascinating journey. So it started in sport, ended up consulting with military units, and then more and more in the corporate space.
And it's really interesting that you talk about that sustaining level of success and how achieving it's one thing, but obviously, the momentum and carrying that through is another. But what you just touched on was the human element. And there's a science, obviously, to success and the way people perform, particularly at sort of very high levels. But again, it comes down to that human element and the feelings and the emotions. How much of a factor do they play?
It's fascinating because, and I've had this conversation in many different groups and contexts. As humans, we're incredibly adaptable, but we can also suppress anything for a period of time. And so we can suppress emotions, we can suppress natural instincts, but in order to, and very often we do that early on to get to a particular level or to achieve something in the short term. But in order to sustain it, you have to be able to manage, understand, comprehend, manage, facilitate, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual well-being in order to sustain it and to find, success. And even just taking it a step back further, helping people identify truly what their level of success is or what their view of success is. And that's very, very important. Very often I will work with teams, or I'll work with coaches perhaps, who move up a level and helping them understand now that at the elite level or at the special level, it requires a different set of skills to be able to sustain success. So what got you to this level is not going to keep you there, and it's certainly not going to be able to allow you thrive at that elite level. And that can be confusing. And it took me a long time even to understand it. It took me a long time, spent a lot of time studying, but also just spending time speaking with, some of incredibly capable people, and understanding how some of them failed, some of them struggled, some of them weren't able to, some of them managed to regain it, others were able to sustain it, and really understanding the difference between, that sudden ramp up, that learning curve or that achievement curve, and then managing to stay there and to understand how to find that balance and to be successful at the top.
So what's interesting for me is seeing your sort of pursuit of these particular niche sort of clientele that you're working with. Why are you fascinated with high performers?
I think because I wasn't one early on. So when I started, as a young kid, you wanted to be the best. So you would try and study and read and learn everything, and you would try things. Uh, then when I got the opportunity to help coach others and learn from some of the best, then you start to realize the nuances, and you realize, man, if I had known that, maybe I could have, maybe. So it just drives and understand, or it drives me to try and have a better understanding. But also, I was very fortunate. A lot of great people were willing to help and share ideas. And then you keep trying things, and you find so many things that don't work. But for me, that allowed me continue to refine a model. It's like a piece of coal or a piece of marble that you keep chipping away at, and you end up refining this model, and you realize this model is the one that's going to work. And I have, I guess, a method or a system that I approach these things with, and it's based around creating a model of the problem and creating a model then. And when you keep chipping away at it until you come up with this resilient model that makes sense in all of these different contexts. And like I said, I've been fortunate, to have worked at that top level from the beginning, and that has made me more aware of understanding. Okay, well, people would come and they would say, "Oh, well, I want to do this," and you'd have to explain to them, "Well, you can't do that until you do these other stages." Or they would do it, and they would do what you're doing, which is being successful for you, but it's failing for them. And then that gives you this understanding that it's different when you get to a particular level, what you need to sustain it.
And what's the mission behind your work?
I honestly just love helping people. I really, that's almost sounds, I get embarrassing, but truthfully, I enjoy seeing other people be successful. And it's not about me, it's about being able to, you either get a text or you get a message, or, somebody thanks you for an impact that you might have had on their career, and, you might never have spoken to them. Those, that's rewarding, but it's about helping, good people go on to do great things. And I think sometimes people tend to question why they're doing things, and you want to be able to be there and support them. Like I said, there have been so many great people have helped me, and you have a duty to help them. And I think we're always looking for role models or for guidance when we're starting out in our career, and so it's just about giving back. But it's, for me, that's incredibly rewarding. I can't explain it in any other way than that. I wish I had a better answer, but I just enjoy helping people do good things.
Well, don't be embarrassed about it. It's fantastic to be able to know
But
how
I
to.
wish I had a more complicated answer. But that's it. Like, you mean, that's what I get enjoyment from, and I really, you know, my passion is understanding, humans and human performance. Like, I mean, at the elite end, or at, what's the best? How can we get a group of people to be the best that they can be? Not just about profit and loss, or not just about achieving the objective, but building, and bringing a group of people together that are truly dominant, intimidatingly, boringly dominant in, across the board. And to be part of that, that's special, because you know that when you do that, that they're going to go on and impact their families, other people, and and I don't like the word legacy because that infers that it's when you're gone, but you know that they're having an impact today and tomorrow, and that's incredibly rewarding.
It's a living legacy, and it's creating that ripple effect that you are having that impact, and you are creating the knock-on effects with so many other people. And I've talked about this with other guests, is that often you don't even know the effects that you have and what that then goes on to do, because you just don't know who that's going to sort of affect as part of that ripple effect.
Yeah, I had a call with four guys. They were wanting to begin a project, and last week, and they were asking for some advice. And at the end, they thanked me for my influence on not just on them, but on the industry. And for me to hear that, I hadn't really understood that. But yes, you can have a bigger impact than you think you have.
And he talked about that it wasn't sort of a set route. You didn't set out to do this. This has sort of evolved as it's over the years. And you did have that fantastic opportunity to start at the top. But what does it mean to make a human better?
Well, I would rephrase it to make better humans as opposed to humans better. And that's really subtle, and it takes a while to think about it. But yeah, you can fix somebody in the short term, but I want to make better humans, in order and that they have an understanding that it's not just their impact professionally, but also in a holistic sense, particularly in a societal sense. Because, I'm not going to go down the road of politics in this short talk, but that is important, because you can't consider yourself, in isolation. You have to consider your impact and your role in society as a whole, because if you want a society to exist and continue to thrive, you have to consider your role and impact on everybody around you and how you can do that. And that means really understanding three core areas. Yes, your professional sense, what you do, but also your personal well-being, your physical and mental health, and then your purposeful living, your legacy, your values, your role in society. And so those are the three core areas that that we look at in particular with high performers, because what tends to happen is professionally they can excel for a short period of time. Sometimes they struggle to sustain it. Their personal life can struggle because of a slight imbalance. They've invested so much. And perhaps later on, then they'll struggle with understanding their purpose or their greater purpose in life. And so those are the three core areas that we look at, so that people can find that contentment, that consistent contentment in living.
And what are the questions that you challenge people to ask themselves?
One of the first questions, you ask somebody is, what do you do? And they'll say, well, I'm an engineer, or, I'm a CEO, or I'm a CFO. And then you'll say, so who are you? And then they struggle to answer. They struggle to truly answer what the difference between what they are and who they are. And then the final question really is, why are you here? And those three questions are at the core. What do you do? Who are you? And why are you here? And when they're very philosophical, and they're very, I guess, abstract. But when you start to explore those questions, you start to find the areas that people have difficulty expressing, or they find it uncomfortable because they just perhaps haven't thought about it. But that's often at the source of understanding discomfort in their life, or disquiet, where they struggle at certain periods when they find that there is this underlying current that is throwing them off. And that's really exciting, because when they start to understand, and we have a lot of fun with it as well, but when they start to realize, okay, so in massage or in physical therapy, you call it a trigger point, where you run your finger along, there's a little knot, and people get a twinge. So it's a little trigger point, and people find, and then when you release it, then all of a sudden things start to come back, and they start to go, okay, now I see where we're going with this.
And they are fundamental questions, but they're ones that people don't ask. Why do you think that is?
So sometimes you shouldn't poke a bear, if or let sleeping dogs lie. So there are a lot of people are, very content. Like, just because you can't express it doesn't mean that you don't know what it is. And I learned that working with an NFL running back, actually still playing today. I would ask him questions about what did he do, and he couldn't explain it to me. But he was still an incredible athlete. But just because he couldn't explain it, couldn't verbalize it, didn't mean that he didn't know what he was doing. So there are lots of us who perhaps can't explain it, but it's fine. It's working well. They have a feeling and intuition. And that if that's working for them, good. But then, there are people who maybe have ignored it or maybe are confused about it. They thought it was this, but as their role, their career, their life has evolved, they've realized, hang on a second, it's not quite what I thought it was. And so that's really, really important. I think it's really helpful as well for people to see that. And they suddenly go, oh, hang on a second, this isn't, I find myself down this path, but it's not going in the direction that I thought it was. Also, I think, particularly professionally, I think we end up going down a particular path and we find, okay, I thought it was going to lead to this, but it's not. It's led to, for example, more hours, or it's led to, it's, greater prestige or whatever, but it's not quite behind the scenes what I thought it was going to be, or I'm sacrificing too much for it. So when those moments come, people find, they get hit like with somewhat of a thunderbolt, and they're kind of going, hang on a second, this is not quite what I thought or what I had in mind.
So you're currently based in LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've traveled all around the world with various clients. Have you chased the clients, or the clients chased you down?
With my career, my life, I've never, it's always been following, either being, invited somewhere. It's just following a passion. And, like you said, I've never had a plan as such. These are the stages or things. It's never been like that for me at all. But there has been, a passion in trying to understand how you can make better people or better teams and improve people. And so that's really been the direction. So it's never been a case of trying to follow either locations or countries or anything like that. No.
And how did you sort of get all of your knowledge? Did you read, or did you learn on the role?
A combination. Like, I went to university. I did a degree. My degree was in woodwork teaching and construction. My master's was in manufacturing. PhD was in computer-based optimization. Then I had a lot of hands-on experience learning and studying. And I've got a library here of a few hundred books I really need to sell or get rid of. I need to convert. I need to get them all in Kindle. But some of them actually I've tried to, and I can't even find them electronically. Some of them are very rare. But it was a combination of, academic study and then reaching out and finding the best practitioners. And I spent a lot of time, and still do to this day, reaching out to researchers, professors, spending time with them, studying, because even with research, the insight that the practitioner can provide, based on their research, sometimes can be far more insightful. But then there's also the trial and error, like implementing things. It's not working. And now very much mentoring teams and, okay, well, did that work? Did that not work? Why didn't it? And that feedback. But then the other stage that works particularly well for me then is, like I said, coming back and formulating, okay, based on all of these experiences, what is the most robust model and principles that can work in these different areas? And that's the excitement. The excitement is when you can build something that is robust. So, a few weeks ago, I was presenting a model to a group in special operations community. I was using a similar model with similar principles then with a corporate group and then in a sporting context, and refining that model. And when you find that you have this model that can work across different areas, that's the excitement. And again, it's based around the person, the elite performer. So it's a combination of all of the different areas. But at the end of the day, it has to work in the real world. Doesn't for me, it has to, because that's where I live.
Well, we all live in the real world. We hope we do anyway.
We hope we do, but as compared to, for example, living on social media or in academia where the criteria are different. For me, it has to work with real people. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
So you're talking about being authentic here.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah, exactly. It has to work. It has to be authentic. It has to get to, and part of the authenticity is working in the real world and solving a real problem, as opposed to just saying, well, do these three things, and just throwing that out there and realizing that, well, it's not going to work for half and it will work for half. And the problem is then that the people who it doesn't work for look at it and go, well, I must be wrong, when whatever's been presented is not robust. It's not hasn't been thought through in a way that it can work in different contexts.
And you talk about the authenticity, you talk about the vulnerability in your TEDx that you shared. And what did it feel like to sort of talk about vulnerability and authenticity on a stage?
I think it was good for me. Well, it wasn't good, but it was important to be able to explore the idea of failure with elite performers, because and again, this is unique to in the higher up you go, obviously the more successful you've been, and you've created a set of steps, a step of processes mentally to allow you to be successful. But there are two things that happen. One are sometimes you don't notice the failure creep. So in other words, small cracks appearing in what you're doing because you haven't refined it enough. The other thing then is that when you step outside of that comfort zone, you struggle and fail, you sometimes ignore it, and you don't look after yourself, or you don't look after the problem itself. And so it was particularly important for me to be able to share that lesson with others, because it was only because of the fact that I had failed, others knew about it, that all of these other people, many of them who I knew intimately, came forward, stepped forward and shared things with me, and still do, to this day, and talk about how, yeah, I screwed up, Fergus. And the number of times somebody has said to me, well, the only reason that, people know about yours is because of where you were and what you were doing. Whereas there have been lots of other incredibly successful people, but just not in the public arena, and you don't hear about their stories. And so the beauty of failure and being humbled, and even just this morning working out with a Marine, and we we're just talking about the importance of being humbled regularly, and allowing yourself to enjoy the beauty of that and to learn from it. It's not a bad thing if you learn from it. And so that was important. It was really, really important for me to learn, or to accept the importance of failing. And so now I try and put myself more often in situations where it's embarrassing, it's humbling for me, whether it's trying to do a workout that I have no chance of doing, or taking up something like trying to bake. Those things are important because it allows you to continue to learn those problem solving skills and to recognize the benefit.
And I've talked to elite coaches and sportsmen before about the importance of failing, because actually they learn more from their failing attempts or failed attempts in sport than when they win. Because when they win, they don't necessarily analyze the performance as much as when they lose.
Yeah, it was Clive Woodward first said that to me. And people, whatever about Sir Clive, some people love him, some people hate him, but I remember I called him out of the blue. He may have vaguely known who I was, and he was so kind to give me, I think, 2 hours of his morning in the middle of the Olympics, actually, or just before the Olympics. Sat and had breakfast with me, and that was one of the things he said to me, which blew me away. And he was making the point that we don't look critically enough at our successes, and sometimes we overanalyze then our failures, psychologically or emotionally, and we take too much from it. And that, I walked out of that meeting, and a few weeks later, I remember saying to myself, there's no difference between winning or losing if you choose to analyze them properly. And so sometimes, and particularly performers, when we win, we think that, or we confuse preparation with control. We confuse the fact that we won because we were incredibly well prepared and we thought that we were in control. We were never in control. We were just very, very well prepared for that situation, and that's when we won. But then other times we will lose, and perhaps we prepared exceptionally well, but it was just the context, it was just the opponent. And so it's being able to look at that, take the emotion out of it and look at it in the cold light of day. And so again, just when you're successful, you have to look at it critically as well. And, when all of the congratulations have been, have calmed down, taking your team and sitting down and going, okay, we were successful, but what did we do wrong? Like, why did we just scrape over the line? And of course, people say, well, you're being too critical, but we're still celebrating, but we're going to use this high to really be more critical, because that's the only way we're going to get better. And then there's sometimes when you lose, when you have to go, okay, we were just beat by a better team, and you have to know how to manage that. But again, the higher up you go, the more difficult it is to be critical. Sometimes it's more difficult to have those tough conversations. That's why, having those humbling moments and enjoying them and seeing the value in them is very, very helpful.
And you talked about Sir Clive Woodward and his impact when he first took over the reins. I remember he did quite a few small things and he made a big difference. He looked into each of the players personally and really, I think he gave them a gift. Each had a gift especially for them that he'd really worked towards, because he knew the importance of the team. And I mean, you talking about working in corporates, talk about working with the elite performers and the special forces. It's so important to work as a team and not as an individual.
Yeah, it's about individual preparation within a team environment. And there's another great Olympic coach, Bill Sweetenham. He used to talk about how, in team sports, you're trying to get everybody to concentrate more on looking after themselves individually. But in the Olympic sports, you're trying to get them more to think of themselves as being part of an Olympic team. And there's a delicate balance so that you can help develop the individual, but they understand their role and the role of the team and the relationship in them. And that's where values and the culture is key. But also, as teams come under stress, they have to recognize that stress can be shared and can be supported by others, so that the team objective is achieved. But most importantly, the vision must be clear so that everybody is aligned. And so, you can talk about values all you want, but vision is critical to this, so that there's a shared vision. Because, I call it the Tyson rule. When you get punched in the mouth or you get knocked down or things are going chaotic, not literally punched in the mouth, but when things are chaotic, you're trying to figure out where to go. The vision is so important, because that just allows people in the moment of confusion to continue to move forward towards that. And that is something that you will find with most, very, very successful groups. They have a clear vision, and it's a vision that everybody has a role in, and it's a shared vision. Now, you want everybody to also celebrate in the wins and understand the losses, but you don't want anybody to start to take it too far either, particularly the losses. And that's where leadership comes into play, where the leaders will take a lot of the pressure off when things get difficult, because they know how to manage the temperature in the team.
And you're talking about the purpose-driven, the values-based, the people-centered, and it is absolutely all of those three things. I talk about the purpose, values, mission, vision, and then the ongoing focus within the environment. And the environment actually is something that is often sort of left to the last piece of nurturing it. How are you finding working with people in that respect?
Yeah, the environment is interesting because, this is something I've always been aware of, is even when you visit groups and teams, is being very cognizant of the artifacts. So, for example, it might simply be the cleanliness, the dress code, things like that. And it's not that it needs to be prim and proper. In fact, sometimes that's a real worry for me when things are almost too perfect. but it's just what does that represent, the style, the mindset. And then you've got the behaviors, how people behave towards one another. But that to me is really what the environment itself is. And so recognizing that that sets a tone for how people are going to treat both the environment and each other is something that a lot of groups miss. But it can be very, very telling, particularly as an outsider when you go and visit, when you consult, when you're working with groups. All of those small things do have an impact over time. Now, and I touched on this at the beginning, 80% of your job is knowing what not to do. So it's about the prioritization and optimization. So it's not a case of going into a checklist and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. It's being able to see which things are having an impact, and then also knowing which things to prioritize and sequence. So if we make this change here, that would take care of these other 5 things over time. That's that taken care of. And it's knowing what all of those things are, and but that takes experience as well, and takes, who I was talking to somebody recently. We were talking about All Blacks and cleaning the sheds, and people had this thing about, well, if everybody was cleaning their locker, yeah, you have to clean the locker room, but there are lots of other things you got to do as well. Just doing that one thing is not going to, and also you can't, again, just copy what the top team are doing, or what you read in an article, or what somebody said. It's what is the pathway to get to there. You got to look back and go, okay, what did they do when they were at our level? What did they do at the next level? How can we aspire to be like that? It's not about setting standards lower. It's about understanding there is a pathway and a routine to get there. Now, you can speed it up a little, but you have to get the order right. Otherwise, all you're doing is you're just creating a superficial layer on top. It's like, right, early on in the new year, everybody's on a new diet, doing a new workout, but you just can't go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. You've got to take your time and get the order right.
Yeah, I was literally speaking about this recently in my January podcast, and I was talking about how this effervescence is going to fade because it's going to ebb as people realise that they thought that they could achieve huge things, and they can, but they try to achieve it straight away, and therefore they then sort of lose interest after not being able to do that. And when you're talking there, I'm hearing this sort of the 1% incremental changes. I know that Brailsford did it in the cycling team for GB. And that's well documented. How are you sort of perceiving or detecting the differences and nuances that need to be made sort of remotely, not being able to go and work with clients at the moment?
Well, I think I personally think it's tragic. It itself is a tragic situation, and the number of deaths and that people have to deal with, I think is very poignant. I think there are opportunities, incredible opportunities for resilience and for self-improvement. I think there will be a lot of good will come out of this over time. I think people will appreciate relationships, appreciate the value of relationships, of community more. But I also think that people have a great opportunity to spend time alone. Now that, if you start spending more and more time on social media, yeah, it's probably not the best use of your time. But if you use this time to truly reflect and create, develop an awareness, particularly of who you are, that will stand in a lot better stead over time. Because, like you said, many people will just drift through and keep making the same mistakes. But times like this, always a believer in looking for what's the opportunity in this moment of difficulty, and what can we. There is always a knife to sharpen. Like, there's always something that you can get better at, and so use that time to do that. But yeah, there will be a lot of good will come out of this, I think, over time. And it's interesting as well, because I think community will improve, because everybody's struggling together against one particular thing, one particular difficulty at this moment in time. So I think that's one of the things that hopefully will come out of this.
It's certainly been an equalizer and allowed everybody to sort of, as you say, reflect and to sort of really stop and pause and appreciate, what opportunities, as you say, there are, and whether they're actually aligned with their values. And it's been a lot of work that I've been working with my coaching clients, is people realize that they'd been on a course that they had no sort of realization why they were going that way. And this has been an opportunity to sort of reassess. Have there been any recent particular circumstances where you've worked with someone and they have realized that they've been on the wrong course, or the course that they didn't realize they were sort of taking themselves on?
Yeah, to just after Christmas, actually, had a client who was, just because of economic circumstances and because of the fact that they just weren't able to travel as much, had to readjust and had to take a different look at their business and what they were doing. But it was interesting. It wasn't about actually changing what they were doing. It certainly wasn't about adding. It was actually about refining and improving the quality of the service that they already provide. And that was rewarding. It was rewarding for me. But when that aha moment came, I was glad, because when you're dealing with very often A-type people, you're coaching, but you're unsure of how they're going to react to the realization that they're going to come to. Because for me, it's always about, can I help the person perhaps see something that I think that's where they're going to end up, but I want them to find that. I want them to uncover it, because it's about empowering people. It's not about telling people what they should do. And so when, sometimes as you're talking around it and eventually they uncover it, you're just waiting to see if they're going to really buy into it. But yeah, it was really rewarding, because very often your purpose, goes back to almost to childhood. And, when that happens and people uncover that, and it's staring them it's staring right in front of them, and they start to see actual incredible potential in something that they already have got there willing in front of them. And again, that's something that when people are in a race to reach stages or acquire things, acquire businesses or purchase businesses early on in their career, sometimes taking the time, or when you get to a particular level, there's only so many companies you can have before now you start to struggle. So helping them realize, hang on a second, I have everything I need. I need to take a step back or take a different perspective on what I have and really improve the quality of those. So there are a lot of examples like that I think are that people are going to find, if they haven't already, over the last number of months.
And with the power of hindsight, can you cast your mind back to when you were a child, when you first realized that helping other people was what you were destined to do?
I think it was all, I only ever played team sport. And I think being able to share in wins and losses with friends, I think that is at its core. And being able to be a resource for others, to peers, to pick up the phone or to try and get some help for what, how can I improve, or how can I do that. I think that's where it comes from, at from a young age.
And you use the metaphor of sheepdogs in your TEDx, and you also say that even a sheepdog needs another sheepdog at some point in life.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of it's lonely at the top. It's lonely, for a lot of I've sat in some incredible environments with some very successful people, and they're on their own, and sometimes even their families, who know a particular side of them, they've either protected them from the complications or stresses of business, so they're not aware of everything that's going on, and so sometimes finding someone you can lean on and be just be open with, share, throw ideas around with. And that's one of the things that I enjoy the most, is being able to talk about, have those awkward conversations. They're not awkward, but others might think they're awkward, but it's how you present them. You're presenting the completely opposite idea or something that you think, or that others would think they would never consider. But you have those conversations, and I call it play because, as kids, when we're growing up, we try lots of things, and we play and we mess around and we find out what works and we don't. So, but I think as executives get older or become more isolated, for want of a far better term, they don't get the opportunity to play around with these ideas. They don't get the opportunity to debate them. They don't get the opportunity to say, well, what if? And that's ridiculous. Or let me throw this crazy idea out there. Let me just throw it out there and let's see what happens. When you can find those moments, clients, and you have a lot of fun with them, that's, that is exciting. It's enjoyable and it's relaxing as well because it's playing. You're playing with these ideas. Now then you make a decision, you go to work, but you have to play with them. You have to enjoy it because that's, what you started. That's where the passion is. You have to play. And you have to have a sheepdog. You have to have a sheepdog to play with. But yeah, but when things get difficult, you got to, you have to be able to, lean on people. I've called later on today with somebody I got to touch base with, and you have to be able to do that.
Fantastic. And just to explain the metaphor that you're using here, just explain what the roles are with the sheepdog and the wolves and the.
Yeah, well, so a lot of leaders or a lot of us in society, I guess, or a lot of us in either families or we take on a role of a sheepdog where we are looking out for others. We have people who we are responsible for. So perhaps it's in a family, it could be at work, it could be in in your community. You have a sheepdog role because there are always people who need, there are sheep that will either need your direction, your leadership, need your support, and you need to be there for them. But there will always be difficult moments, and there will always be, there are bad people, there are difficult moments, there's chaos, there are wolves essentially that will be around. But there are times when even the strongest, fittest sheepdog needs to lean on another sheepdog for support, or even simply, like I said, to be able to play and talk around ideas. I've made mistakes. I've got a lot better at it, at being able to reach out and lean on others. Because again, as a leader, very often you're the one who people come to for either direction or come with a problem. They're looking for direction. You give an answer. So you end up becoming essentially somebody who's just simply answering questions and helping others and solving problems. But then there are times when you need either to take time off, or so you need somebody who can come up and say, in a quiet moment, hey, listen, you don't look so good. You need to take some time off. Or that you can pick up the phone or walk down the office and go, I need to talk through a few things because this is just overwhelming me.
Well, talking of being overwhelmed, we've covered performance, resilience, authenticity, leadership.
I've overwhelmed you already, Amy.
No, it's been fantastic. I mean, we've talked about failure, we've talked about preparation and control. I mean, there's so many different sort of themes here that have been fantastic. I really appreciate that you coming on the show and sharing your insights with us. How would people get in contact with you, Fergus?
My website is probably the easiest, fergusconnolly.com, and everything from there.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll make sure that goes into the show notes. Thank you. And again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Could you leave us with some final words?
There's always an opportunity. Like, no matter how dark or difficult things are, and I mean this sincerely. I know a lot of people are always, it's a cookie cutter or it's a fortune cookie comment, but even in the most difficult circumstance or even in the most challenging times, there's always a learning outcome and there's always an opportunity. Now, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be rosy in the morning, but when things get really, really difficult, sit there for a moment and enjoy the difficulty and the pain and understand that there's a learning moment here if you find it. Now, you can ignore it and you can whine about it, but if you look for that learning moment, it's going to make things better down the road and you are going to get better. So I know a lot of us are in difficult times, and I know that there's no horizon, in the short term, but this is an opportunity to learn and to get better.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.